TopMedTalk.
Well, welcome. It's day 2 of Anesthesiology 2021, the annual meeting of the American Society of Anesthesiologists. We're here in sunny San Diego. I'm Desiree Chappell, your host. I'm joined by my co-host, Professor Monty Mythen, Professor of Anesthesia and Critical Care at the University College London and Editor-in-Chief of TopMedTalk. Good morning, Monty.
Thank you, Desiree. It's very, very good to be here.
It is, absolutely. And Professor Sol Aronson.
Good morning, Desiree.
Good morning.
Day 2. We're cooking.
It is, yeah. So, guys, what do you think? It's been going pretty well so far?
Really well. Well.
Yeah.
Generosity of people to sit down and talk to us.
Yeah.
The incredible generosity of the ASA to give us this space and this opportunity. What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing at all. Well, Monty, we are here with TopMedTalk. Tell us just a little bit about TopMedTalk and its affiliation with EBPOM, because I know some people are asking about that.
TopMedTalk's the broadcasting arm of evidence-based perioperative medicine. Principally, we started to audio live stream all of our conferences a number of years ago. More recently, we got into the virtual conferencing space, and that's, we're doing sort of hybrid part of that today. EBPOM, however, is much older. It started in 1997. It's an international collaboration of people who are interested in advancing the whole sort of science and practice of perioperative care of our patients. And I think we're going to get into discussing quite a lot of that in the next 20 minutes or so.
That's it. That's today. We have some great conversations lined up. Be sure to check out our agenda. But first, we want to jump right in with our first guest, Dr. Chris Steele. Chris, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks so much, Desiree.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. I know day 2. How was your first day back in business yesterday?
It was wonderful. We haven't been able to see a lot of people in person in quite a while, and it's wonderful catching up with people that you just miss. And it's so much different just being able to see people in person. It was a great experience.
Yeah, instead of Zooming all day long.
So true.
Yeah. Well, Chris, we're going to talk about something that we've talked actually about on TopMedTalk and at our EBPOM meetings quite a bit. It's perioperative surgical home. Mm-hmm. And, just diving right in, can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, just briefly, the patient perioperative surgical home is a patient-centered, physician-led model of coordinated care that spans the continuum from the decision to have a procedure to after the patient recovers from the procedure.
Yeah. And Chris, you're an anesthesiologist, so tell us just a little bit about yourself and then your connection to PSH.
Yeah. So I'm an anesthesiologist by training, trained up at Penn State, had a wonderful experience there. Joined White River Health System back about 11 years ago, and we were fortunate enough through the foresight of our previous CEO to join the Perioperative Surgical Home 1.0 Collaborative. It was the American Society of Anesthesia put together some collaboratives with the original collaborative. About 50 hospitals came together to see what is the PSH and can this work in a real hospital system. And moving on from there, I was on the steering committee for PSH 2.0, and then the third iteration of the PSH, I was the medical director for the PSH 2020. So have a little bit of experience in the PSH, and it's really been a blessing to me personally as a professional as well as to the institution that I work at. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, fantastic.
So Chris and I, we touched on this briefly while we were sitting down to get ready. The PSH, the perioperative surgical home concept, perioperative medicine is the term we use, team anesthesia in the UK, to refer to something which I think is pretty similar. And then there's the whole sort of discussion about, does enhanced recovery in that, or is it in enhanced recovery? And, to be quite frank, does it matter? If we're all trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, well, I would say, first of all these things are remarkably complementary. And so I do think it is complementary. When we're describing it, usually we would say that the perioperative medicine is the practice of medicine in this specific arena. ERAS, or Enhanced Recovery Protocols, a lot of people have the protocols in general at their institution, and they all are different at a little bit of different institutions and how they're implemented. We would say the perioperative surgical home is a model in which you could reproducibly lay different protocols, enhanced recovery protocols, as well as other protocols, which may be more efficiency or financially based protocols at an institution. And the PSH really works on how to set up this model reproducibly at an institution, regardless if it's an academic center, a private practice, or a rural hospital.
Great, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Can you write that down for me? I'd like to publish that.
Don't ask me to say it again.
We can write it down for you, maybe.
Blessings of technology.
It's recorded. When I want to kind of just pick up on the ERAS, which I appreciate as being a dimension, a point of reference within the broader context of perioperative medicine. Speak a little bit, if you would, to us about how, we all have a sort of sense of perioperative medicine. I think Monty shared with us yesterday, the concept was introduced 25 years ago or so in the States, but yet it's been unmet. That sort of time from declaration or contemplation of surgery until surgery exists, but it's been ignored or unmet or under-recognized. Why all of a sudden now is it sexy to talk about it?
Yeah, well, I think that we typically focus on things that, from a business standpoint, generate revenue. And even if we're in a nonprofit organization, we still need to generate money to be able to pay for the supplies, the people, and provide great care for our patients. And from a payment mechanism, the payment mechanism isn't there from the decision to have surgery to when people have surgery. And so I think we neglected that out of the gate, possibly could have contributed for those reasons. I think over time what we found is we can provide a lot better care to patients when we focus on taking care of them prior to having surgery. And so I think we've discovered that over time and realized that this is an area previously untapped that has a remarkable amount of potential. Conversely, I think you could say the same thing for post-discharge from a hospital. I think we provide an immensely high level of care. And when people go home, sometimes that care isn't coordinated properly. And we just say, follow up with your PCP. And I think what we found, a lot of institutions have found through value-based care focus, is that we can actually remarkably increase the outcomes for our patients by focusing on the area after discharge as well. So I think those areas are remarkably salient in trying to provide great care for our patients.
So is fee-for-service, which is this sort of weight, around our necks or ankles, do we have a love-hate relationship with it? Is it what we, are holding steadfast to, and yet is it preventing us from going forward with some of these other novel programs?
I think it certainly is. Some people would probably consider it their panacea. It's the only way they generate revenue for their health system. And some health systems are very progressive and have gone to a capitated model or almost a fully value-based care model. And I think a lot of people are sitting with one leg on each side of the fence at a health system. And so I think that it does prohibit us. There is apprehension stepping away from a fee-for-service model. That's one of the big benefits we've seen with the perioperative surgical home, is a lot of institutions have helped change the mindset from a change management standpoint and given anesthesiologists, surgeons, and many times specialists the same type of value-based care incentives that the ACO gave primary care doctors. And so we've been able to see that through bundled payments like the BPCI program or CJR, they've been able to use their perioperative surgical homes to not only provide in bundles organized by payers, but also shadow bundling at their own institutions.
Well, Chris, I think that those are really great points. I think there's sometimes confusion about how the perioperative surgical home actually works in practice. Just kind of walk us through an example of what that looks like.
Yeah, well, it's different institutions have done it different ways. I think that what you have to do is understand where you are as an institution from a sophistication standpoint. A lot of times institutions just starting the very first step is to identify the stakeholders where you're trying to set this up at an institution. This is not a one-man show nor a one-specialty show in setting up a perioperative surgical home. So I think first step is really step out, figure out who at the institution are the stakeholders in perioperative care like we're talking about, and bring them to the table and figure out what are the needs, what is salient to each and every stakeholder, and how do you create this program to be a win for each and every one of them. And so I think once you do that, you figure out what are the goals for the institution. Again, some of the principles and components are things that we've been fleshing out, and in coming up very soon we'll be able to reveal those. But what we can do through conversations with the stakeholders is start with creating this patient-centric, physician-led program, and find usually one service line and an energetic sponsor of that service line, and achieve reproducible care through standardization of the pre-op process, intra-op process, and post-discharge. Usually after that occurs, that's when you start scaling it up. Usually other procedures in the same service line, and then other service lines as you scale it up. So that's usually the process where organizations do it. Some are remarkably sophisticated and already have reproducible systems like ERAS or other things in place where they really just need to get the stakeholders together and figure out how to organize their current system. So it really depends on where you are as to how to set this up.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, there's an implementation guideline that you have now just developed with the ASA, is that correct?
Well, the ASA has been working on this for quite a while, and it is something that is actually now available for pre-sale right now here at the ASA. And at this specific meeting, they're just rolling it out. And it was really interesting. The ASA actually brought members from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgery, along with several representatives from different size institutions, academic, private practice, rural, urban, all types of different practice together, along with nurse representatives from the National Health Council, which is a patient advocacy group, as well as the American Hospital Association, all came together in the implementation guide work group to come together to create it. And a similarly diversified PSH steering committee was actually leading that process. And so they came out with this very recently, and it's available now for pre-order, and it should be coming out in the next couple months, which will shed a lot of light on some of these processes. What it is a way that all the things that have been learned over the last decade of PSH 1.0, 2.0, and PSH 2020, all the lessons learned can be kind of put together into one guide that can really help an institution implement this at their own hospital, which is what we're really excited about.
And can it be, or is it fair to say it's something that can be tailored to the individual institutions? If you're a beginner, you can start on page 1. If you're relatively familiar, you can start on page 10, and if you're an advanced, if you will, learner, you can start, I'm being a little facetious here, but is it adaptable to need?
Yes, and that's part of it. We actually have a section in the guide that specifically talks about how this guide is to be used, and that's it. You can use it in a modular type model. Some people just want to worry about pre-op, or just want to worry about intraoperative standardization, or just post-operative care. And so you can look at it in different ways. And also, we've tried to look at it from different stakeholder standpoints, because we think that this information is not only salient for anesthesia providers, for hospitalists, other clinicians, as well as for the C-suite champions, nursing. A lot of different areas could benefit from this and really take a big role in implementing this at their health system. So we're really excited about it. It's going to be a really fun tool that I think a lot of people are going to benefit from.
Chris, that sounds absolutely fantastic. One of the challenges we have with implementation guides is sometimes the next bit, which is the FTI, the failure to implement, which is a new abbreviation that's creeping in all over the place. Mm-hmm. And part of that failure to implement is the request that has to go in locally to say we can't make change without people who have time to make change. Mm-hmm. So we have to have a period of investment in people making change. Is that all in the guide, or are there people that the ASA can send out or signpost people to say how to implement?
That may be available down the road.
Okay.
A lot of this is in the guide, and change management is a very big thing, engaging the proper stakeholders and looking at the different the supporting microsystem of the hospital. But you're right. And as an absolute expert, the biggest failure of protocols isn't the protocol, it's the failure to adhere to the protocol. And that's typically not because we're just dealing with a bunch of jerks that work at hospitals. It's because we're working with human beings and the processes that are remarkably complicated. And so we have to make the process simple. And sometimes that's remarkably challenging and takes a lot of forethought and effort.
And as we refer to quite often, change is hard and culture eats everything for breakfast.
Everything.
As the recurring adages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Chris, you mentioned 1.0, 2.0 in 2020, the evolution of this. What are some of the lessons that we've learned? I mean, obviously one of those is probably, sustainability of programs and things like that. So just walk us through some of that.
Yeah. Well, the PSH was created to really accomplish the quadruple aim, trying to improve quality, improve patient experience, and reduce cost, all while making providers' lives better. And so we've got examples from multiple 120, 130 institutions that have participated through these collaboratives of all those. We could go through specific anecdotal examples, but there's been a myriad of publications. If you go to ASAHQ/PSH, on that website, you've got a lot of articles. You've got a PSH literature review. You've got cases from a PSH on there. That's a webcast series that specifically has multiple organizations that have done the PSH and their experience and tips. You've got podcast and also links to the implementation guide, white papers. So there's a lot of examples of those in that specific area if you go to it to get information. But achieving the quadruple aim is what we've seen through a lot of those in evidence. And like I told Saul, the biggest part to me is really transitioning specialists to a mentality that isn't just fee-for-service. And I think anesthesia, we really need to stop thinking about a fee-for-service model on everything and really move toward value-based care. And we've really excited in the PSH. We've been able to have some political wins. The new MVP, anesthesia MVP, has been accepted, and that's going to hopefully come out in 2023. That will be a value-based care model through CMS. We also have the improvement activity of PSH has gone from medium weight to high weight. Those are all things that I think the government is saying the PSH model is something that really does embrace a shift from fee-for-service to value-based care, and something that I think we can all benefit from.
Yeah, fantastic. I was going to ask you about, you talked about some of the resources and on the ASA website. Excuse me.
It's okay. I can share my coffee.
I know, I'm not ready to drink.
It's okay.
Are there any other resources that we have? I mean, is there data sharing that's happening, or, what are some of the other resources that are available?
Yeah, right now, most of our things are on the PSH. There currently is not a current collaborative going on right now. So the implementation guide's coming out. Like I said, all those resources that you have, podcasts, literature, all those are going out right now. There's a lot of organizations that are very similar and complementary. Like Monty said, EBPOM is in this space. The ASA, the American Society of Enhanced Recovery, is in this space. The American College of Perioperative Medicine, the ERAS Society, which is based primarily out of the UK, and a lot more that I haven't mentioned, are all innovators in this space. And so I think that the really exciting thing when I first got in this about 10 years ago is there just wasn't as much excitement in this area. And so many players have come and so much focus on this specific specialty that I think a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm really excited to kind of see what comes up next.
If we've got time, Desiree,
yeah,
I've got
please,
two questions, but I'll take one for now and then hand over to Sol, I'm guessing. Data. So in other words, once you get into it, having standardized dashboards and feedback and benchmarking that gets right down to provider level is often key to success. Is that part of what the PSH enables? Or does the implementation guide say this is how we think you should do it? So
the implementation guide does list specifically data points that they believe should be tracked. Obviously, it's challenging at each institution based on their EHR capabilities and their infrastructure. It's remarkably challenging. But I think we also talk about not only the specific metrics, but also what you're doing, looking at leading indicators, lagging indicators, our outcome metrics. And what we really try to focus on a lot of times is try and make it pretty simple and focus on the structure, having regular meetings to actionably do things about it, and try to avoid vanity metrics and too many metrics out of the gate. Once you get the infrastructure of having regular meetings with your stakeholders, they'll start determining what's salient for their organization. But I'll tell you, one of the biggest metrics and one of the hardest nuts to crack for every organization is adherence to these protocols. There was a really good study in Europe, the EPOC study, I'm sure you're familiar with, and it was the protocol was absolutely phenomenal that they put together, and they didn't show that it made any difference. And when they went through all the data, what they found is it wasn't the issue with the protocol. It was getting people to adhere to the protocol. And that's why I think we need to work on the model and the system and how to make things reproducibly more easy to follow.
Can I follow up on that?
Please.
So the follow-up experience, so that protocol was 20 plus elements.
Yes.
And it was just too complicated, and you put a lot of effort into getting back to where you were.
Yeah.
The one that followed up that was 4 or 5 elements was very successful. and it made the outcome variable that people were pursuing no more complicated than drink, eat, and mobilize. So just have that single metric which everyone can get, and we've just published the national data, from tens of thousands of patients. It works basically.
Yeah.
If you just focus on drink, eat, mobilize, and then go up. If it's not working, go back upstream, if you sort of mean. But if it is working, don't look too hard.
So,
sorry.
Oh,
Go
no,
ahead, Chris,
that makes perfect sense. So make it simple and make it to where people can do it, and it works. And that's kind of making a framework where you can do that, I think, is essential.
Well, and getting getting the feedback, which is the problem. You don't get any feedback. I mean, you have to feed that back to everyone that's working within it, or it will never work. Sorry, Sol.
No, it's fine. It's a great discussion. I have an expression. I'm going to take this opportunity to say, and I think it just rings so true, and I've never wavered from this being applicable. Data is important. We should base our actions on evidence and data, and that's important. That said, between data and change is reality. And what do I mean by reality? I mean it's emotion, it's culture, it's trust, and it has to be easy to do. And that speaks to the 20 variables versus 4, making it simple to do, because people, despite data, won't do it if it's hard.
Yeah.
But they also won't do it if they're culturally not aligned, or there's an emotional tug, like fee for service, or they just simply don't trust it. Like, transfusion requirements that we've been studying for, 3 decades. And so between data and change is reality. And I think if we embrace and accept that, implementation guidelines and evidence that we would collect and collate and share is really important as foundational, but it's always about culture and people's, it's change management. Change management is hard.
It is really hard. And sometimes, I'm working with this right now in the quality space. It's what kind of feedback do you want to give back to everyone within it? Because maybe it's not every single data point, things like that, but it's just like, patient experience kind of stuff, or, it's not necessarily hard data, it's some of the soft stuff too. And that works to help change culture. People start to feel good about it, and things like that. So I always find it very fascinating and interesting to see how other people are doing that as well, because it's tough. It's just really hard.
That was the beauty of having the PSH collaborative, is we were able to bring in a lot of different institutions and see what worked for them in large academic centers, rural centers, and a lot of those, and have these kind of conversations, because sometimes what's salient to one group, anesthesiologists, may not matter to surgeons or CFO or administrators. So I think it's really important to create those.
Can I have my second?
Please.
Thank you. Chris, there's been a lot written, and we've spoken a lot and shared a lot about the preoperative preparation. I'm not saying we've got there and we've got it all done by any means, but it's well described. The next, and we need to get on and do that because it's a massive opportunity. But possibly a bigger opportunity is that post-discharge window, because if you can do day case joint replacements, to be able to do that, you've got to have a great out-of-hospital support system, and it should work, and it should be a win-win-win-win situation backed up by the bit beforehand. But I haven't seen a lot written about that, and I haven't seen a lot of the how-to. Before
you answer that, Chris, I want to just piggyback on the question and add this to it. I believe I've experienced a bastardization of the term enhanced recovery after surgery to be advanced discharge after surgery. Yeah. And so to Monty's point, how do we anchor to recovery and not discharge as the metric of success?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of times it depends on where you start. And most anesthesiologists start with pre-admissions testing. And so most of them are very comfortable with pre-admissions testing. And most of our training deals with optimizing people as an anesthesia consultant and optimizing people and getting them through surgery. And very few people in the anesthesia world really have a lot to do with discharging patients. And we tend to focus, we have a self-confirmation bias. We tend to focus on the things that we agree with and that we know about, and we tend to not focus on things that we don't. So I think part of anesthesia's world is not focusing on transition and discharge in the U.S. as much, but there is a lot of literature there's more literature with hospitalists and some other ones, but in my opinion, I firmly believe in, as is the PSH model, that we would be the best people to coordinate that care post-discharge, because we can set appropriate expectations prior to surgery, which is a big driver of what people do after surgery, and then they'll have the continuity of care with the same provider or system taking care of their medical problems after the surgery as well.
So I just come back on that briefly. It's a bit like that sort of aha moment to say that if we work from our goal is drink, eat, move within 24 hours and work backwards to achieve that, our care of the elderly doctors who now specialize in frail and elderly patients having surgery, they start with a discharge plan. That, and they say, how are we going to achieve that discharge plan? I thought, whoa, that's cool. I get it now. You've got to have a pain regimen that enables the discharge plan.
Mm-hmm. And I think setting expectations on the front end allow us to do that. I think as a specialty, we need to see ourselves through that continuum. There are obviously political landmines that we have to navigate there.
Trust.
and I do think it's complementary. I've worked at systems, and I've worked with other systems that the surgeons and the hospitalist and the anesthesia all work together for the betterment of the patient. Obviously, money and different variables come into play there, but I do think it's possible. I've seen it done, and I think that it is a huge opportunity for our patients, because hospitals, when they can take patients and coordinate their care post-discharge, they then can look at outcomes, disparate data from different demographics and all kinds of things to improve it across the board. And I think that if we don't look at that and we simply just charge them to their PCP, we'll never be able to get the keys to our own car and be able to really improve these metrics. So I think it is a huge opportunity that we have to group together the pre-op and the post-discharge.
And communicate to the PCP, which is eventually the landing spot. What the heck just happened?
Yeah.
How did they do? What did we do to make them do what they did? There you go. And we don't do that well, I believe.
We don't. I think we need to treat them like our customers. And what we need to say is, how can we make this process better for you? We need to deliver the patient to them in perfect position with all the documentation there, and perhaps engage them, the ACOs, a lot of organizations that I've seen successfully do well in this. Engage their ACO and say, how do you want us to bring the patients? What can we do? Sometimes they participate in screening their patients and other things. So I think as we collaborate, going back to one of the very beginning things, engaging our stakeholders, the ACOs are a stakeholder in this. They refer the patient, they get penalized, and we can help them in this model through reducing the total cost of care and improving quality. So we can bring them to the table and all work together. And I think if we're seen as advocates for the patient and we are trying to deliver value to the stakeholders, I think we can all work together to do what we said, which is make this really a patient-centric process.
Yeah, that's great. Chris, thank you so much for this great conversation. I know we probably could continue to talk on this, something we're all very passionate about. We do appreciate everything that you're doing in this space, and congratulate you on your work, and continue the good stuff. So
thanks so much. Thanks for your time.
It's always good to see you, Chris.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for watching and listening to TopMedTalk. We are going to have another wonderful day of great conversation, so be sure to check our schedule. We might be delayed here and there. We're just trying to work within the exhibit hall. You know how that goes. But we
live.
It's live stuff. But we also have all of our enduring content, right, Monty, on the website.
Absolutely. There's plenty. If you look around the lobby there in the area that you came in and go into the on-demand section, you'll find lectures, videos, CME opportunities, and a route into our podcasts. We put up some editors' picks for this meeting. But if you then segue through to the TopMedTalk website, there's over 1,500 podcasts you can delve into there.
Yeah.
And people can subscribe to TopMedTalk.
Absolutely.
How do they do that?
If you're on the live.edpom.org site, that's great. If you're not, if you're listening to this some other way, be sure to check us out there. Please. We also want to say again, thank you to the ASA for supporting us to be here in the exhibit hall to have these very important conversations, and all of our sponsors in industry and academic partners. So thanks.
And just want to add one thing to what Sol said. When we use the term subscription, it is actually free.
Yeah, everything is free.
Free.
Yeah, the real kind
Real
of free.
Free.
All right. Cheers, everybody. Thanks.
See you later.
TopMedTalk. Thanks for downloading TopMedTalk. Don't forget to subscribe via your podcatcher. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also, don't forget, TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that. If you check out ebpom.org, you can find low prices on some of the conferences we're organising around the world. Many of them are virtual and don't even involve you leaving your own home. Check out ebpom.org now.